I used to work the overnight shift at Mcdonald's in a small town off the highway. It wasn't exactly the safest place. Dim parking lots, flickering street lights, and just enough traffic to bring in the kind of people you'd rather not deal with at 2 a.m. But the job was easy, and the money was enough to keep me afloat. There were only 3 of us on shift most nights. Me, the manager, and this guy named Ethan. Ethan was off. At first, he seemed normal, maybe a little too quiet, a little too intense, but nothing that raised alarms. He was in his late 30s, lanky, with greasy hair that clung to his forehead and a stare that felt like it drilled into your skull. He always wore his uniform, even when he wasn't on the clock, and he never, ever spoke about his life outside of work. The first time I felt something was wrong, it was small. He was making burgers, and I noticed he wasn't just assembling them. He was whispering to them, murmuring under his breath like he was talking to each patty. I laughed it off, thinking maybe he was just tired. But then I started noticing other things. Sometimes he'd stare at customers for too long, his eyes wide and unblinking. Other times, he'd disappear into the walk-in freezer for long stretches, coming out drenched in sweat, breathing heavy like he'd been running. One time, I caught him standing in the back, gripping a raw patty in his bare hand, squeezing it so hard, the juices dripped through his fingers. He looked up at me and smiled. One night, it got worse. It was just Ethan and me on shift. Our manager had called out. It was quiet, just the hum of the fryers and the occasional car in the drive-thru. I was cleaning the front counter when I heard a noise from the kitchen. Something wet, like meat slapping against the tile. I turned the corner and saw Ethan crouched over a pile of raw ground beef on the floor, both hands buried in it. He was breathing heavy, massaging the meat like it was alive. "Ethan, what are you doing?" I stammered. He didn't stop. He just turned his head, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "Making something special." I backed away. "Dude, that's disgusting. Get that off the floor," I shouted back. He grinned, his fingers still kneading the raw meat. "Do you know what people really taste like?" I froze, too stunned to speak. "I do. It's not like the movies. It's sweeter." My stomach turned. I took another step back. "Ethan, what are you talking about, bro?" That's when he stood up, fast, too fast. The beef slopped onto the floor with a sickening plop, and he took a step toward me. His hands, coated in red slime, twitched at his sides. "They don't even notice. Not when you mix it just right," he said softly. I bolted. I didn't care about my paycheck, my job. I just ran. I bursted through the front doors and sprinted into the parking lot, gasping for air. My hands fumbled for the phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. The police came fast. They found Ethan still in the kitchen, standing there like nothing had happened. But when they checked the freezer, that's when they knew something was horribly wrong. Inside, buried beneath frozen patties, they found bags, and it wasn't beef. Ethan didn't even fight when they took him. He just kept smiling. They never released the full details, but rumors spread about missing drifters, about people who had stopped in for a late-night meal and were never seen again. and about Ethan, who had apparently worked at 3 different McDonald's locations before this one, each one with a string of disappearances. I quit that night, never went back, never ate McDonald's again. But sometimes when I pass one late at night, I swear I still see him. Not in the restaurant, not in the parking lot, but behind the counter, smiling, still watching. I used to work the closing shift at a McDonald's in a rough part of town. The kind of place where the neon sign buzzed like it was about to die and half the security cameras didn't even work. We stayed open late, mostly for drunk college kids and sketchy loners who had nowhere else to be. But there was one night, one customer, I'll never forget. It was a little after 1 a.m. The place was empty except for me, my manager, and one guy in the back washing dishes. We were ready to close when the front door creaked open. A man walked in, tall, thin, wearing a hooded sweatshirt that looked damp, like he had been standing out in the rain for hours. His face was pale, almost sickly, and his eyes, they didn't look right. Too wide, too alert, like he hadn't slept in days. He stepped up to the counter, but he didn't speak, just stared at me. Hi, can I take your order? I asked, forcing a polite smile. Dead silence. I glanced at my manager, who was counting some inventory, pretending not to notice. The guy licked his lips, slowly, and then he finally spoke. You ever wonder what's really in the meat? I let out a nervous laugh. Not really. Do you want to order something? He didn't blink. No. I'm just here to watch. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced toward the back, hoping my coworker was still there. The man tilted his head, like he could hear my thoughts. I've been here before. Last week, last night. I didn't recognize him, but something in his voice, it made me feel like he wasn't lying. I tried to keep my voice steady. Sir, if you're not ordering, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. That's when he smiled. But it wasn't normal. It was stretched too wide, his teeth yellow and uneven. I'm not leaving. I like watching, he said. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the bathroom. I looked at my manager. Dude, we need to lock the doors. Something's wrong with that guy. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, as soon as he leaves. But he didn't leave. Minutes passed, then 20, then 30. He was still in the bathroom. My manager banged on the door. Sir, we're closing. No response. We looked at each other. Something felt off. She grabbed the key, hands shaking, and unlocked the door. It swung open, revealing an empty stall, a flickering light, and a single shoe in the middle of the floor. No footprints, no sound, just that shoe, sitting there like he had vanished into thin air. We searched everywhere, but he was gone. I don't know how, I don't know why, but when we checked the security footage, my blood ran cold. The cameras caught him walking in, caught him standing at the counter, but they never caught him leaving. We closed early that night, and the next, and the next. I never saw him again. But sometimes when I'm alone, I get this feeling like I'm being watched. And I swear, when I turn to look, there's a shoe right where he should be. I used to work the late night shift at a 24-hour McDonald's just off the highway. It wasn't the nicest place. Fluorescent lights buzzing, the smell of stale grease hanging in the air, and a parking lot where people lingered a little too long. Most nights were slow, just the occasional trucker or drunk college kid rolling through. But one night, I met someone I'll never forget. It was around 1 a.m., dead quiet. My coworker was in the back cleaning the fryers, and I was manning the drive-thru alone. And that's when I heard it. Static crackling through my headset. And that's when I heard it. Static crackling through my headset. And then I heard a voice. Hello? I snapped to attention. Hi, welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order? Silence. Just faint breathing. I repeated myself, glancing at the screen. No car, no order. Then I heard it. A low, wheezing laugh. Behind you. My stomach dropped. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. Just the empty kitchen behind me. I ripped off the headset, breathing heavy. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the system was glitching. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the drive-thru window. I turned, and I nearly froze. A man stood there. No car, no shoes, just standing in the drive-thru lane, barefoot on the pavement. His clothes were filthy, ripped in places, his skin stretched tight over his bones. His face was gaunt, sunken eyes locked onto mine. I reached for the window latch, ready to slam it shut, but he moved fast, slamming his palm against the glass with a sickening thud. I jumped back. His fingers dragged down the window, leaving greasy streaks behind. You forgot my order, he said. His voice was dry, cracked, like he hadn't spoken in days. I swallowed hard. Sir, you need to leave. We can't serve walk-ups. He just stared. Then slowly he grinned, revealing teeth that were too white, too perfect, like they didn't belong in his mouth. I stepped back, my hand fumbled for the button that locked the doors. That's not very nice. I live here, you know. You'll be sorry. My skin crawled. You don't see me, but I see you. I turned to yell for my coworker just for a second. When I looked back, he was gone. The lot was empty. No footsteps, no sign of him. I barely slept after that. Every night I watched the cameras, but I never saw him again. Until one morning. The manager called us over, pale as a ghost. She had found something behind the dumpster. A pile of old clothes, a single shoe, and a McDonald's receipt from 1997.